Our next talk will be given by John on the Sermon on the Mount.
Thanks, Laura. All right, so we're going to dig into the Sermon on the Mount. Not too much of an introduction needed, I don't think. It's essentially Jesus's most famous set of teachings. It's a really short text. It's about 3 chapters. It's 3 chapters from the book of Matthew, which is one of the Gospels. But those 3 chapters are packed with teachings, so we'll just jump right into it. Now, if one wants, one can just read the Sermon on the Mount in any number of the English translations. And it's a nice text, good ethical teachings. It's fairly simple to kind of go through and just think of it as a single speech being given by Jesus. But what I want to do is I want to kind of dig in a little bit and show a little bit more what the text actually is, which is a book of instructions and rules for his disciples. So Jesus goes off with his disciples to the top of the mountain and delivers these teachings to them. So if we look at it as a book of instructions and rules, it falls into 3 essential parts. The first, right off the bat, Jesus sets us up with an ideal to aim for. This is the so-called Beatitudes. So we'll dig into the Beatitudes in a moment in a bit more of a Platonic sense. So we'll look at that. It'll be the ideal that Jesus sets up for us. The second part is the laws or the rules. So he goes through and takes 6 existing laws from the Jewish texts, and he amends them and adjusts them and comments on them. And then he adds 6 of his own. So there's a total of 12 laws or rules that are established there for his disciples. And the final part is about the path. And there's a few statements. It's fairly short, but really profound. There's a handful of statements that Jesus makes about the nature of the path that have become really cornerstones in Western esotericism and are used in theosophical texts and theosophical approach as well. So we'll dig into these 3 parts. I'm going to go fairly quickly because I want to dig in a little bit into some of the terminology and such. But we'll kind of cruise through and you'll see the bigger picture of this instructions as we go. So we'll start with the good or virtuous man. This is essentially Jesus setting up the characteristics of the ideal for his disciples to aim for. So what does the successful disciple look like? These are the Beatitudes. So this is what we would commonly read. If you pick up the King James Version of the Bible, or really any modern translations, going to have more or less the same kind of terminology. So I think a lot of us are probably familiar with these. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek, and so on and so on. These are all, obviously, these are English translations. The original is written in Greek, and some of them are okay, and some of them are absolutely terrible translations. So this is part of the difficulty we have in digging into this stuff. So one of the things it's important to note is that, yeah, the original is Greek. It's written at a time when the whole area from Greece to Turkey, Syria, down through Israel, Palestine, into Egypt was saturated by Platonic philosophy. This is when the Platonic philosophy was merging into what was being presented as the Neoplatonic philosophy. There's also the Gnostic philosophy at the time with all kinds of really interesting allegorical teachings. And a lot of what happens with these Beatitudes and with the rest of the New Testament is the English translations and then the common Christian approach just really extracts the words out of that historical context. So we're going to try to bring it back into that historical context a little bit. So let's go just a couple little things in the Greek. I don't want to bore you too much with terminology, but we'll get into the Greek a bit to just kind of show what you can do with this text if you dig into it a little bit deeper. So the first is, what does he mean by blessed? So all these statements start, blessed are the blah, blah, blah. Blessed are these guys, blessed are those guys. What does it actually mean? So in the Greek, it's a term makarios. In Greek philosophy and Platonic philosophy, makarios is a synonym of eudaimonia. And eudaimonia literally means a good daimon, or a good spirit, a good man. These 2 terms, makarios and eudaimonia, describe the state of the virtuous man, the state of one who has rooted themselves in the highest virtue and attained the good. So commonly you would see these terms translated as something like happiness or bliss or felicity. You can think of it as the same kind of context as you would think of the term ananda in Indian philosophy. It's that internal bliss that is attained at the end of the path. So here's a quote from Hippodamus that really kind of nails it down. Felicity cannot subsist without virtue, and virtue is first generated in that which possesses reason. Felicity indeed is the perfection of human life. So when Jesus says blessed are, he's essentially talking about the perfection of human life. Those who have attained that state are this way. So he says, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are those pure in heart. He's describing the characteristics of that person. The next term that is really fascinating, I'm just going to go quickly through it because it's just a kind of an interesting one for context, is kingdom of heaven. It's one of the most common terms we have from Jesus. And in the Greek, it is basileia ton uranon. Now, that first word, basileia, means chief, master, lord, or king. And uranon is traditionally speaking, the vaulted sky, or the home of the gods. It's the home of the god Uranos. So let's look at what that means. Here's a little statement from Blavatsky on that. Uranos personifies all the creative powers of and in chaos, space, or the unmanifested deity, and is the personification of the celestial powers. So when we're talking about what is the realm of Uranon, we can reinterpret this, let's say, as the realm of the masters of the creative powers. When you dig into these terms and you go a little bit deeper into what Uranos signifies, it's the realm of ether from its occult signification. So when you're talking about kingdom of heaven, we're not talking about some vague abstract idea. In the Greek, where these terms come from, we can dig in a little bit deeper and see what it actually means. Just a little side note at the bottom there on the slide, you'll see the term janaloka. So for Theosophists who might be a little bit familiar with the lokas, the kingdom of heaven in the Greek, if we dig into it that way, is the same as the realm of Janaloka. That's the realm of the Kumaras. It's the realm of the Nirmanakayas, the Mahatmas who watch over and guide humanity. So what is the kingdom of heaven? It's that realm. Okay, so first beatitude, I just want to address this one in detail, and then we'll just kind of summarize the rest and have a quick look through them. Beatitude 1 says, blessed are the poor in spirit, and it's a bit of a controversial one because it's a terrible translation. Blessed are poor in spirit is just a really confounding statement. It doesn't make much sense until we dig in a little deeper. So what is the word poor in spirit? It's tokoi to pneumati. So you have two words there, tokoi and pneuma. Tokoi means a beggar. Just because one is begging doesn't mean one is poor. So a beggar is one who begs something, who supplicates something, who asks earnestly towards something, or tries to bring something or invoke something, right? What is this person begging towards? Pneuma. Now, pneuma signifies air, breath, spirit, soul. From a theosophical perspective, pneuma is an occult term that represents the human soul or higher manas. There's a quote here from Blavatsky I'll go through really quickly. Divine spirit, that is Atma, the highest principle in man, is symbolized by sun or fire. Divine soul, or Buddhi, by water and the moon, both standing for the father and mother of Pneuma, the human soul or mind, symbolized by wind or air, for Pneuma means breath. Okay, poor in spirit is not a good translation for those two terms. One who begs or supplicates to higher manas gives a far wider, far deeper context for what Jesus is actually saying here. So we can reinterpret this now and say, okay, what do those terms poor in spirit actually mean? One who calls upon or begs upon higher manas. And why would we beg upon or call upon higher manas? So that the higher can position itself above the lower and guide the lower principles in ourselves. So if we want to reinterpret Beatitude number 1, Instead of blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs, we can go a little deeper and say something like, happy are those who supplicate to the human soul, or pneuma, for to them belongs the realm of those who are masters of the creative powers. So we get a lot more depth when we dig into it like that. Now, we can do this with all 8 of the Beatitudes, but I'm not going to drag you through all of that. So let's just do a little summary, and I'll just give you some quick summation of what we can do with these 8 Beatitudes. The first, which we've just gone through there, happy are those who supplicate to the human soul. The second, happy are those who are penitent. Penthos is the Greek there, and penthos is a practice. What penthos indicates is when the voice of conscience causes us to reflect inwardly and repent for our own wrongdoings, our own sins. Parakelio, you'll see at the end, happy are those who are penitent, for they will be summoned near. The word in Greek is parakelio. That is the exact same as the term Upanishad. It means to come near or be drawn near to the master, to sit at the master's feet. So happy are those who are penitent, for they will be summoned near to the master. The third one, happy are the gentle. Meek is also a fairly bad translation, though maybe at the time of the King James it had a different meaning. But blessed are the meek is not a great statement either. But happy are the gentle is a lot more accurate. So we can take that one, happy are the gentle. The next one, happy are those who hunger and thirst for justice. Now, in the Christian text, this is where we find the word righteousness. This is the term dikaiosune in the Greek, and that is the highest virtue in Platonic philosophy. That's the virtue of justice. So when we take it out of the Platonic context, we get this idea of righteousness, which kind of ran rampant through Christian teachings for a couple thousand years. What we're actually talking about there is the Platonic virtue of justice, which is the highest virtue. So those who hunger and thirst for the highest virtue is another way of thinking of that one. Happy are the compassionate. That's a pretty self-explanatory one. These next two are actually pretty good in most English translations. Happy are the pure of heart, and happy are the peacemakers. And then the last one, again, to do with justice. Happy are those who are driven for the sake of justice, those who have the motive of the highest virtue. So this is another way we can kind of dig in and have a closer look at the Beatitudes and see what is he actually trying to say here. And when we think of it as an ideal, that Jesus is setting up a picture for us of what the ideal man is, what are the disciples aiming for, then we get this list of characteristics. Who is that ideal man? What are the characteristics? He supplicates to the human soul. In theosophical terms, we can say the lower to the higher, getting the higher in ourselves to guide the lower in ourselves. He is penitent or repents for his own sins. He is gentle. He thirsts and hungers for justice. He is compassionate. He has a pure heart. He's a peacemaker, and he's driven by justice. So we can say he has the highest motive. Highest virtue is his motive. So this is the first thing when Jesus sets this out for his disciples. The first thing he does is set up this ideal, which is exactly what we need when we're approaching the path. First, we need to have some idea of where we're going. What is it that we're trying to attain? And this is a great summary of the characteristics of who we are trying to become. He then follows that ideal with the laws or the rules of discipleship. Now, of course, in the Christian text, these are given sometimes in parable form, which was the classic way that Jesus taught publicly. So when we go through the laws, there's some interpretation that needs to happen here and there. But essentially what he does is he takes 6 existing laws and he amends them and corrects them. And then he adds 6 laws of his own. So we'll start off and we'll just kind of skip through these as quickly as we can so you can kind of see what he's getting at here. The first one, thou shalt not murder. We also commonly hear this as thou shalt not kill. The original Hebrew word ratzak means unlawful killing. In the Greek, it's phoneo. So in context, it's usually actually should be interpreted as murder. It's unlawful killing, not just killing, period. But that's just a little side note. What Jesus says to this is he says, you have heard it said, thou shalt not kill. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of judgment. So what we see here is with this law and the next law especially is Jesus is moving his disciples away from a rule or a law towards an outer action, the act of killing or the act of murder, towards what's actually happening within themselves. So his expansion to this law, he's not saying that get rid of thou shalt not murder or thou shalt not kill. He's saying, yes, that, and look inward. No anger towards a brother and sister. No belittling anyone. He specifically says, don't call someone raka, which means idiot, or moros, which in English, moron. So no belittling anyone. Reconcile whenever someone has something against you and always maintain goodwill towards your adversaries. So he's taking a much deeper look at what underlies that old law of thou shalt not kill or thou shalt not murder. In the second one, thou shalt not commit adultery. We're all pretty familiar with that one. He says, you've heard it said, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you that whosoever look at a woman to lust after her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. So again, he's taking it from the outer act and he's pointing his disciples back into themselves to look at what's happening in themselves. So his expansion there to this law is about lust and desire. We could just kind of take it as an overall treatment of controlling your lust and desire, right? So it's not just enough to refrain from acting out adultery. It's to look at what are the underlying inner causes behind it. The third one is one we'll go into in a little bit more depth because this is a great example of Gnostic teachings going into the Christian Bible and not being understood as Gnostic. So the law is about divorce. The old law was whoever shall put away his wife, it's a great way of phrasing it, whoever shall divorce his wife must get a writing of divorcement. So if you want to divorce, file for divorce. Jesus says, both divorce in itself and even marrying a divorced woman is equivalent to adultery. And he gives one caveat. He says, except in the case of, and the Greek term is porneia. In the King James, that is translated as fornication. But we'll have a little deeper look at what this actually means. Law 3 is actually about prostitution. That might seem a little weird, but we'll get into that. Law 3 is about prostitution. In the King James, it's fornication. In modern translations, you'll also find it translated as sexual immorality. So from a Christian standpoint, you'll say, well, divorce is only permissible in this situation. It's only permissible to divorce in cases of sexual immorality. But the term porneia means to prostitute. And that has a deeper meaning. It's a whole allegorical and symbolical meaning in Gnosticism. In Gnosticism, prostitution indicates the condition of the soul when it is incarnated and given over to carnal powers. So this is a view in the Gnostic symbolic approach where what is it that's actually prostituting? It's us prostituting our soul to carnal powers of the earth. So here's a quote from a Gnostic text. As to this whoring, the messengers of the Savior commanded, guard and purify yourself against it, and not just the body's prostitution, but especially the soul's. The greatest struggle is the prostitution of the soul. So let's look at that a little closer, and then we'll explain what Jesus is actually talking about in this law. There's a whole allegorical story about this. The soul is a young woman. This is how the allegory goes. The young woman, 1, leaves her father and incarnates. 2, becomes a prostitute. That is, she gives way to the carnal powers of the earth. 3, after getting entangled in that, she eventually appeals to her father for help. He sends the bridegroom, who is her true love and master. They get married, and this marriage brings about the regeneration of the soul. So obviously this isn't marriage as we commonly understand it, and Jesus isn't talking about marriage as we commonly understand it. This is from the same Gnostic text. This marriage is not like carnal marriage, in which those who make love with each other become satiated in their lovemaking. In this marriage, once they join, they become a single life. In theosophical terms, this is the divine union of buddhi and manas, the female and male principles in ourselves. So when we think about it in that case, this marriage, the merging and union of higher manas into buddhi, that marriage cannot be severed unless the soul chooses to immerse itself in the carnal powers. That is, unless the soul symbolically prostitutes itself to the earth. So when we go, let's do this voice of the silence quote. If thy soul struggles to break the silver thread that binds her to the master, know, O disciple, thy soul is of the earth. This is the exact same approach. That silver thread is the bond of that marriage of buddhi and manas. It breaks only if we struggle to break it. So when we go back to Jesus adjusting this existing law, if we take it out of the Gnostic context, we lose everything altogether and we end up with don't divorce unless there's some kind of crazy sexual immorality, but otherwise stay in your marriage forever. And that's the way it's been interpreted for years. What Jesus is actually talking about is don't give yourself to those carnal powers of the earth, because that is what divorces the soul from spirit. And marry your soul to your spirit. Merge manas into buddhi and cement them together as one. So it's a much deeper law than we would understand if we just take this sort of surface meaning of it. Okay, law 4, thou shalt not forswear thyself. Forswear means essentially to commit perjury. So it means to swear that you're going to tell the truth and then lie. Right? So the original law was make your oaths and don't break them. Jesus comes along and says, actually, if you can't break them, if you can't hold those oaths, don't even make them in the first place. It's kind of a don't bite off more than you can chew type of law. So don't swear an oath if you cannot or do not intend to keep it. There's a bit in the Key to Theosophy on page 51 on that if people want to dig into that and have a look. There's a couple of statements by HPB that go along the same lines there. Law number 5, famous one that we've all heard of, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Jesus comes along and says, not a good idea. His correction to that, resist not evil, turn the other cheek. He also adds to that something that's not commonly repeated from this law is increase your reciprocity beyond what is asked. So he gives the examples and we can say, okay, so if somebody asks for the shirt off your back, don't just give them the shirt, give them your coat too. So Jesus goes really far on this. And we have an example in recent times of somebody who took this one very, very seriously, and that's Gandhi. Gandhi put into practice this correction of the eye for an eye law and built it into the foundation of his movement. So this is a little quote. You can just read it there while I'm speaking. This is actually a summarization of Gandhi's teachings on it, or statements on it from the movie, the biographical movie, which is great. So we can see this in action by observing Gandhi's life. Jesus' correction to this eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth is turn the other cheek. And if you want to understand what that means and how to put that in action, look at Gandhi's life. The 6th and final law that he updates is thou shalt love thy neighbor, but hate thy enemy. And Jesus corrects this one in ways that we're all probably familiar with. He says, nope, love also your enemies. And he says to bless and pray for them. So here's a summary of the 6 laws that Jesus updated. The first law, we go deeper into the thou shalt not kill. So we end up with nonviolence in thought, word, or act. Goodwill and reconciliation with your adversaries. Again, look at Gandhi's life and the way he put that into action. Law number 2, control of desire and lust. Law number 3, no divorce, but let's understand that in the deeper context of the Gnostic marriage of the soul. Law number 4, don't make your oaths or vows that you're not going to keep. Law number 5, resist not evil, turn the other cheek, give reciprocity. And 6, love your neighbors and your enemies, bless and pray for everybody. So those are the updated laws. Now Jesus is going to add on to that 12 of his own, and the first, or 6 of his own, and the first of that is my favorite among all of them, which is don't be a hypocrite. So he gives a few examples of what being a hypocrite means. He's essentially saying, don't do things just so people see you doing things and think you're moral and think you're amazing. Don't do things just to get praise. And the examples he says is, don't seek praise for almsgiving. Don't go around giving and telling everybody, I donated all this money to charity. I'm such a great person. Don't seek praise for prayer, and don't seek praise for fasting. So these are common practices, especially in his time. And people were doing them publicly and trying to get all kinds of praise for how holy and amazing they were. And he gives the examples of just do this privately on your own, because this is about yourself and what you're actually doing. So don't be a hypocrite. 8, don't store up earthly treasures, instead store up heavenly treasures. This is also one that has deep, deep meaning in it, because what is the heaven he's talking about there? We can go back to Uranon and John Aloka if we want to. He makes a statement that wherever your treasure is, your heart will also be, which I think is a really profound one. And it goes to what are we putting our attention towards? So when we decide to walk the path, where is our motive? Where is our attention? The third part, he says, keep your eye single, and eye is singular in that text. So keep your single eye focused and clear. And final, you cannot serve two masters. And this kind of goes to the core of this law. He says you cannot serve both God, we could say Theos, or the divinity within if we want, and Mammon. And Mammon is the Syrian god representation of wealth. So if you're going to walk the path, you can't have it both ways. You can't serve earth and heaven. You have to choose. So you have to be all in. That's one way of thinking about that law. Law number 9, don't worry for the future. This is a pretty popular one and got really popular, especially in, let's say, the hippie movement. Take no thought for tomorrow shall take thought for the things of itself. This is also the part where we get the statement about the lilies of the field. And a lot of people take that as, hey, just everything's going to be fine, man. Don't worry about it. Everything's great. But Jesus doesn't say that. He puts a big caveat in there. He says, seek first the kingdom and its justice. Again, in Christian text, that'll be righteousness, but justice, the highest virtue. Seek first the kingdom and its justice, and all these things will be added to you. Okay, so if one commits themselves fully to the kingdom, fully to the highest virtue, then these things will be given to you. And the way he talks about it is a loving father will provide for his child. So commit yourself to the path, and then you don't have to worry about the future. But it's not just a sit back and just let the future take care of itself kind of law. 10, don't judge others. It's a pretty simple one. Why don't we judge others? Well, he says, don't judge others or you will be judged. In the same way you judge others, you'll be judged. By the same measure you judge others, you'll be judged. So can we summarize that? Why not judge? Because of karma. The next part he adds to this is just a reiteration of don't be a hypocrite. He says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? It's a great phrase. So don't judge others, because you know what? If you're judging others, you're probably also being a hypocrite and breaking that earlier law. Law number 11, don't cast pearls before swine. It's a really popular one. Blavatsky loved this one. She used it quite often. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. So it's a pretty graphic statement. This is essentially the law of secrecy, right? So there, and it's the core of why Jesus taught publicly in parables. He says he teaches publicly in parables, and only in private with his disciples does he teach directly. And this has become sort of the core of, if you think of any esoteric body or esoteric school, this is one of the core laws in those schools, which is secrecy in esoteric matters. And the final law, the one we've all heard 1,000 times, which Jesus puts up as the summary of all laws, is the golden rule. Here, do to others what you would have them do to you. So he phrases this essentially as, okay, this is the final law. It is also the summary of all the laws and the prophets. So he places this in the primary position. So I would say probably we could approach this from Jesus' point of view of if you're going to ever just pick one rule and go by it, this is the one. This is the one to go by. Okay, so Jesus sets an ideal for his disciples. This is what you're aiming for. And he gives them a whole list now of laws and rules. We can summarize all these here: nonviolence, control of desire and lust, no divorce in the Gnostic way, don't make oaths or vows you will not keep, turn the other cheek, love your neighbors and enemies, don't be a hypocrite, don't store up earthly treasures, don't worry for the future, don't judge others, the whole secrecy and esoteric matters, and the golden rule. So this is Jesus setting up his instructions and his book of rules for his disciples. The final part, which is just a short little ending part of the final chapter, is Jesus' statements on the path. The first of these is really famous as well: ask, seek, and knock. This is about how we approach the path. So we need to ask about it. We need to learn about the nature of the path. We need to seek it out, and we need to learn how to knock and knock correctly. There's a quote from Mahatma K.H. on this, where he says, "The door is always open to the right man who knocks, but he has to come to us." And Jesus is saying the exact same thing: seek and knock correctly. The other statement is about the narrow path versus the narrow gate and the wide gate. This is one that Blavatsky loved and used quite often. So enter through the narrow gate, for wide and broad is the gate that leads to destruction. So what Blavatsky points out with this is that the difference in which gate we enter is essentially about motive. Entering the narrow gate means we've already subdued our selfish desires. If we haven't subdued our selfish desires and we try to enter the gate, it's going to be the gate to destruction, because we're going to be following our own selfish desire for the occult, is the way she approaches it. How to recognize the difference between a true and a false prophet, or true and false master or disciple. So what's a genuine master? They're known by their fruits. So if you're looking for the path and you're looking for a master, watch them and watch the results of their actions. Now, how to recognize a genuine disciple? This is one of my favorite phrases from Jesus. He says, "Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven." So not everybody who just prays or invokes Jesus' name is going into the kingdom of heaven. He says, "But he that doeth the will of my Father." So we take that in, if you look in the Voice of the Silence, Father is a term for the master, the inner master, or the inner guru. So what is the true disciple? The true disciple is the one who does the will of his master. And finally, build your house on a solid foundation. Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. So we have to build our house strong. In theosophical terms, what is the house? Well, the house is the inner vehicle that we're developing along the path. We have to build that vehicle strong so it can withstand any and all forces that will be pushed against it. We have a very similar part in the Voice of the Silence as to this teaching from Jesus here, about building up the protection and the protecting wall around the Holy Isle. So these are the statements Jesus makes about the path. Ask, seek, knock. You must seek out the path and learn how to knock correctly. Enter the narrow gate, not the wide gate. That is all about what is our motive. How to recognize a true master and a true disciple. So look for the fruits of the master if you want to recognize one who's not who's a true master. The disciple follows the dictates or the laws of his master. And make sure you build your vehicle on a strong foundation. Build your house strong. So this is Jesus giving a book of instructions for discipleship. Now, of course, you can read the Sermon on the Mount and you can read it in a way that's applicable to all kinds of ways to daily life. But when we dig into it in this way, we see how specific he is getting for his disciples. So it's said that you can walk the path and accomplish the goal through any tradition. And in these talks, we're drawing texts from all kinds of traditions. If the Christian tradition is the one that you feel the most drawn to, and you are going to walk the path within the context of that tradition, this here is the summary of Jesus' instructions for walking that path. And that's essentially what the Sermon on the Mount is all about, these kinds of direct teachings to his disciples. And if we are going to adopt ourselves as a disciple, this is a great place to start. And that's it. Thank you all.